It's the Lockdown Flyers podcast for Friday, January 31st, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is wondering what this trade possibility could be.
Yeah, that and wondering what I was watching on the ice too.
Hmm.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And to keep up with our episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are going to get to some other stuff later in the show, including looking at the new look Colorado Avalanche prior to the road trip. We've got a little bit of Utah name consideration to talk about. But of course, it is weird that this game is kind of like secondary to all this because there is a lot to talk about the loss to the Islanders, especially given it's two shutouts in a row for the
Yeah, two
Flyers.
two shutouts. Michkov didn't see the ice for 2 periods. It's all normal stuff.
Right. Very normal stuff. Um, you know, I've got to feel bad for Adam Jennings, to be honest, because
Yeah,
he gets the call up. They're talking about it in terms of him playing well recently, which is true. That they want to see him and see some other guys, and they picked him to get called up first. So it should be a good day for him. And the chaos around the game, not so good. Owen
I mean, I could
Tippett
tell you,
is
I could tell you how much chaos there was on defense. So on the Kyle Palmieri goal, I asked him, did he see a lane, and that's why he went to the net? And he was just like, no, I just went past the defender, and once I got by him, I knew I had a good angle and a good shot. So again, just bad defense by Drysdale, and he knew once he beat Drysdale that it was over.
Yeah,
Great.
just prior to the game actually starting, though, Owen Tippett is out
Yeah.
and is day to day at this point. So Abel's checked back
Yeah.
into the lineup. I thought Abel's was kind of invisible in this
I
particular
saw him
game.
forechecking a little bit, but that's it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be fair, nothing, like you said, nothing was normal in this
No.
game. So, then it boils down to the benching of Michkov, to your
Right.
point. And that was huge because not only was there words to be had between Torts
Yeah.
and Michkov on the bench, which is never a good situation.
No.
You want that kind of thing to happen behind closed doors, right?
You do. You do. And then you could see his posture on the bench was, we knew he wasn't playing. He was just kind of leaned over on the thing, probably mentally checked out. He knew he wasn't going to get called. You knew there was going to be opportunities with a power play. They didn't put him out there for the power play. So who did it really teach? Was it really teaching a lesson to Michkov because he made a bad defensive play? Is that really what we're going to stand on here? No, it's baloney.
Yeah. So then, the situation with them really only playing with 10 forwards because Morgan Frost got pulled as
Correct.
a potential trade piece. However, Joel Farabee is the trade piece, according to Elliot Friedman.
Well, that was the
So,
first rumor. I mean, I mentioned Farabee to people because that was the rumor I was seeing. So, okay, like that's why I didn't want to put online who it might be, but we knew both of these guys could get traded. Like we talked about it on the show. I did hold Danny at his word that he said he would extend Frost because of the RFA, but then I should realize GMs almost never tell the truth. So there you go.
that is true. There's no incentive for them to tell the truth at
No.
any given time. And obviously this trade rumor with the Calgary Flames that is developing literally as we are recording here. So we will definitely recap it in its entirety once the deal is complete here. But Andrei Kuzmenko and Jakob Pelletier are the players from the Flames side. And this is very clearly a salary dump on the Kuzmenko side of things because
No
he's a
question.
guy, that has a $5.5 million cap hit. And that's obviously why Farabee has to go the other direction because you got to
Right.
figure that out. And the Flames want to, give it a shot here. And Farabee could be a good piece for that.
Oh, he definitely could be a good piece for them. I expect Farabee to do well outside of John Tortorella. So I don't have an issue with seeing him do well. I think he will. I think what my problem with this deal is, Kuzmenko came over and Vancouver got a great year out of him. They signed him to this big deal and he's never done anything since, right? So he'll see ice time. It's not like he's never going to play. He's going to play. And maybe he'll even play with Michkov. But again, he just never settled into the NHL. He's like average or below average. And Jakob Pelletier, if I see a narrative that, hey, he's a former first rounder, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Just because you
Right.
got drafted in the first
It's like,
round,
where did you go? What was your GPA in high school?
right?
Who
It means
cares?
nothing now. What
Yeah.
matters now is what you are, and he's fast and skilled, and he's never been able to put it together. So that's the interesting part about that. It's not like Calgary's so good that they'll just get rid of these guys because they have too much talent. That's not why.
Yeah. So Morgan Frost is also headed to Calgary as
Right.
part of this deal, both of them.
Well, they get
Now,
a nice center out of it, and if they put Frost and Farabee together and they start producing, like, are we supposed to be shocked? No.
yeah, it's really interesting because, Frost may have legitimately been pulled from the game due to an injury,
He could have been.
but
We don't know
also
yet.
be included in the trade.
Right.
So,
Right. And that's why I kept telling people, like, it's possible he was banged up because a lot of Flyers have been banged up the
mm,
last couple of days. We did talk about how this game would be a problem matching the physicality of the Islanders after the night before, and clearly they weren't up for that. And then you add the benching, you add Frost not being there, you add Tippett not being in the lineup, and the Flyers look like a shell of themselves.
it is interesting because I think it does weaken the Flyers overall,
It
right?
definitely does. Now, again, that may be the plan temporarily so they could, draft higher, and that's fine. My issue with it is I never mind if a team is just saying, "Hey, look, this is what we're doing. We're rebuilding. That's fine." I will never kill them on that. What I will kill them on is you have two guys with talent here that you never really fully developed, and I believe they'll develop elsewhere. That's my issue.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know. I'm just struggling with what this does to help the Flyers, other than that potentially tanking to move up in the draft.
Right.
And I understand that Kuzmenko's salary, like, it's just this season, so
Yeah.
it's a non-issue moving forward. I
Yep.
just like the Flyers have very weak centers, and
Yes.
to get rid of one of them in this deal, to me, even thinking forward to next season, makes no sense unless there's something waiting in the wings that's not Jet Luchenko. I'm struggling to understand
I
this
mean,
particular deal.
you can't worry about what's going to happen next year right now. Paling will come back, presumably, and Lawton will play center the rest of the year, and that'll be it. They'll probably send Abels back, and those will be their centers. And okay, that's fine. And they'll dip further in the standings, and maybe that's the plan. You have to see what they're getting otherwise, though, because Pelletier, I don't believe, is a good long-term piece. And are
Right.
you getting picks out of this? There has to be something else in there. Otherwise, I would just say just saving on salary for two, somewhat talented guys that have shown sparks of really good talent, probably not worth it. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, if there are any other pieces or another trade that happens after this that kind of balances things out, we'll absolutely talk about that. But as of now, Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost are headed to the Calgary Flames, and we're going to meet some new Philadelphia Flyers in Kuzmenko and Pelletier, and see what that does to the locker room. I think that part of it should be real interesting as well.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because Farabee's really well liked. I think Morgan's well liked. I think Morgan's misunderstood by the coach, and I think that's a big reason why he's going.
Yeah. All right. Well, uh, stay tuned for more about this trade and any other further Flyers action leading up to the trade deadline. In the meantime, we're going to talk Colorado Avalanche and their big trade and what it means for the game against the Flyers on Sunday. Attending a sporting event or concert or show is an unforgettable experience that brings fans together, and Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I looked for tickets to see Wicked on Broadway, which I haven't seen in forever. But with the movie, I wanted to recall how it ended, and it was really important for me to do that before the next movie. So, browsing through the deals was simple. I found great value for all kinds of seats around the theater. The super deal was especially impressive, offering the best value for the event. The app's features like seat views before you buy and all in pricing with no surprise fees at checkout made the experience smooth and reliable. Plus, on time ticket delivery and their lowest price guarantee gave me peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On our Monday show, we will, of course, be recapping the Sunday game against the Colorado Avalanche, which we are going to talk about shortly. Plus, it's Monday, so we'll have our nemesis of the week and so much more. This little mini road trip nestled amongst the Metro Division matchups that we have for the Flyers right now, I think it's really interesting for the Flyers because there's certainly an opportunity here to get a few points in this playoff race. Because I wouldn't necessarily say that these teams are the most consistent of teams in the NHL.
I think that's fair. I mean, really, there's very few consistent teams in the NHL, so I think that's accurate. And yeah, I mean, again, I don't really give the Flyers a lot of chance in the playoff race, but if you're going to have a chance, this would be the way to do it.
Yeah, I think so. And, as we've seen, it's very clear how the Flyers win and what has gone wrong when they lose. Like,
Yeah,
there isn't like this vast mix of things that go wrong, right? If they keep their defensive structure and get quality shots on goal, they win. That's the formula
yeah, I
there,
think for the
right?
most part that's true.
And so they really have to work. And I think the Devils game that we just had, uh, will, I think, be a good learning experience in terms of this is exactly what happens when that defensive structure breaks down.
Yeah, because it was good for a period and then it started to break down. The Devils are a strong second period team. The Flyers still have those second
Yeah,
period issues. Like they've gone
it's
away a
true.
little bit, but they're back now like a bad cold. And so, yeah, I think those things are a factor. I think it's all a factor. I also think that because the Devils decided they were going to play a little more physical, that they only had a high pace on the 2-on-1s and on occasional plays, not the whole games like they were doing last time.
That's true.
But and the East is going to be like that. But then when the Flyers play some of those other teams out of division and they play the Central and the West, they're going to keep pace the whole game. So this is like the issue with the Flyers is they have to be able to play two ways.
Yeah, I think that is also fair, and certainly the games against the Western teams tend to be a lot more wide open,
Yes,
and I think that keeping that defensive structure against that is a much more difficult task, in my opinion. But
it
I
is.
think it's something that the Flyers can do and have shown that they can do in the past, and they just have to repeat that now for the Colorado Avalanche in particular here, obviously, they've had a few games now since the big deal that sent Rantanen to Carolina, but now we kind of got to focus on, well, how do Natchez and Drury slot in here? Have they been effective? Like, have they adjusted to, overall offensively missing, that one offensive piece of the triumvirate that they used to have,
Yeah.
right? And it's been a mixed bag, that's
hmm
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be more of an adjustment for them than for Rantanen and Carolina, even though he'll have to play a little bit more of a two-way, but I still think it's a bigger adjustment here because he was a
Yep.
big part of the offense. But they have guys like Cale Makar. Sam Girard could add his own offense if they wanted to. Devin Taves can add more offense if they want to. So if they decide we're going to get more offense from the blue line, they could do it. And so I think that is the tricky part of this. Plus, they have other guys that score well too. Like we could go for another couple players, and they're all risks. I think when you're playing them, you got to clog them up before they get over center ice. If you
Yeah.
don't, you're in trouble. And especially if it's the McKinnon line, but any line, because their defensemen are so mobile that on every pairing, that is to me the biggest issue.
Right, and they put Natchez in right where Rantanen was on that top line with McKinnon, so
Yeah.
in theory, that line should not miss a step,
Nah, but
right?
they're going to.
I mean, yes, of course, but I think, like, given time to adjust, I think there is enough of a similarity that they should be able to continue the level of production on that line overall, that they had before.
I'm not certain of that. I won't sign on for that because I think Rantanen's a 100-point player for a reason. It's not all just about McKinnon, and I think Netchis is a 70-point or 65-point, whichever, player per game for a reason. And I don't think McKinnon's going to raise him more than 10 points. So I think there is an adjustment there, and I think honestly, the best thing that could happen to them is, and this would be near impossible, but it's still possible, is if Landeskog comes back. If he were to come back, then that
Well,
solves the
that's the
problem.
miracle, right?
Right. And then that just moves down, and then we never have this conversation again. But for the
Sure,
purposes
sure.
of this game, they're still going to score 3 goals. Even when they're at their worst, they're going to score 3 goals.
Right, and that's why the conversation is continued. Do they need another center, or can they afford to, move on at least this season without another top center?
Good question. I think that one they'll figure out in March. They'll be one of the teams that
Yeah,
can wait until March to figure that
yeah.
out because they're good enough now that it's not going to be an immediate thing.
I think that's fair as well. So, between the trade and the game against the Flyers, they have lost 2 games, one to the Bruins and one to the Islanders, which that Islanders game, they lost 5-2. They were actually, like, up early and had a pretty strong start to that game and then just kind of melted away and the Islanders picked it up. So,
Yeah.
that was interesting, and then they won a close but high-scoring game against the Rangers,
Yeah.
5-4 in the middle. They're facing the
That one
Blues
they had to
tonight.
pull out from behind. That one
Yeah,
they won within
yeah,
the closing seconds. I remember that one.
yeah, and so they're facing the Blues tonight, who are having their own issues, but
Yes.
I think that it is a very uneven time for the Avalanche, that's for sure, and that's where I think the opportunity can be for the Flyers.
Yeah, I think it's an uneven time. I grant you that. I think it's one of these situations though that they still have guys that play top speed. They have better
Mhm.
goaltending than they did. I think that's an issue, and I do think they will push the pace like the Eastern teams aren't. So I think all these things are things you have to look out for.
Right, and I think one of the other things too is that it's, I would say, sometimes underappreciated about the Avalanche, because you look at their blue line and Cale Makar and you're like, "Oh, he's so offensively oriented." But the Avalanche are 5th in the NHL at shots against per game played, so having, like, the lower shots against per game played.
Right.
And so they do have a strong element of defensive structure to their game.
They do. And they do have some physicality, and they do have the home ice altitude advantage. And we've
Yep, that's
seen,
big.
and it's big because, like with a team like the Flyers, we've seen them run out of gas in the third period if they're playing at pace. So if I'm Bednar, I'm playing at pace the entire game. waiting for them to kind of run out of gas, which I think would happen. And then it would, even if you're behind, you have a chance of catching up. So I think that's probably the biggest strategy they could employ, honestly.
Yeah, I think so. And, you look at like the Avalanche special teams, not especially impressive, right? But still better than the Flyers.
Sure.
So there's that.
I mean, it's hard
But
not to be better than 28th on the power play, as an example.
absolutely. But they're 20th. It's not even
Yeah.
like they're close to the top 10
No,
either.
no.
But, I think that, and with the Avs power play being 20th and the Flyers penalty kill being 20th, like who knows what could happen there.
Yeah, I mean, that's one where, who knows, and it probably splits. It probably does split on that one.
It does. It does. Like the only clear advantage the Flyers seem to have is on faceoffs, and we've talked about that and making sure the Flyers, employ that strategically, which is hard to do on the road.
It is harder to do on the road. Having Sean Couturier back helps that, though.
Yep, it absolutely does. But yeah, it should be a real interesting game on Sunday. We will talk about it a lot more then. In the meantime, there's a lot next week happening before the break going into Four Nations. And one of those things is the trade deadline. We are also going to be facing Utah at Utah for the first time, and they are having their own issues with their name for next year. So we're going to talk about all of that coming up next. So next week for the Flyers, we talked about the Avs on Sunday. We're playing Utah in Utah for the first time on Tuesday. So that'll be interesting for the team to get to see the Delta Center out there. Then we have a couple of games against Metro Division rivals again with the Washington Capitals, who are they? What, don't
They're
remember
one of the
them.
best teams in hockey. That's who
I
they are.
know. I know. That's the thing. And then
They
the
make great
Pittsburgh.
moves in the offseason, and Ovechkin's
Yep.
healthy. All that helps.
Right. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins, who will have a brilliant game and then like 4 lousy games in a row.
Right.
That's kind of who they are right now. But they do show some flashes of brilliance and
They
always
do.
seem
Last night
to.
was a big win for them.
Yep. So they know how to step up their game when they need to. And so all of that leading up to the trade deadline, which is March 7th. So a little ways after Four Nations, but it's
6
about
games.
2 weeks.
Yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. And, there's not a lot of games in terms of getting additional information about players
No.
beforehand. So you pretty much have to know now, like if you're targeting a player,
Yes.
like you should know by now, right? You
Well,
may not
pretty
have a
soon.
deal.
Unless somebody has been injured and you really want to get a
Right.
good, 5-game look or something. Yeah, but mostly yes.
Yeah. And, we had said that we would know the Flyers trade deadline situation by this break. And do we think that's still true?
I mean, I would, and I think Danny does. He just doesn't want to say it out loud, but I think he knows he's a seller.
I think so too. I absolutely think so. I think, there's the rare possibility of a buying situation if it
Hockey trade.
creates a hockey trade like we talked about or it creates the right kind of cap space to make a future hockey trade.
Yes.
Like that's kind of what we're looking at here. So all that being said, is it worth even discussing any of the trade rumors out there on the table, or is it just churn for the sake of churn?
No, I mean, you should always discuss them, because if there's a way to get better and you're not really getting too much older and you think in 2 years you'll be that team that can compete, then any of these players we're going to talk about will help you in that quest.
Right. And so obviously one of the bigger names out there is Elias Pettersson from the Vancouver Canucks. He's been talked about in connection with a whole slew of different teams.
Sure.
And it's not that the Flyers are anywhere near the top of the list, but you have to say, okay, to get a guy like this, like what can the Flyers even offer? And that's where I feel like the Flyers just come up short next to some other teams in terms of quality play relative to what Vancouver needs.
No, and that's true. I mean, Flyers fans, no offense, but Luchenko's not a big enough name. He's not.
No,
And so that's not going to do it. They would ask for Michkov. Like
they
that's
would.
legitimately what they would ask for. So there is no real deal to make here. Just because you offer a lot of pieces and or picks, they're not after that. They're a playoff team. They're like 1 point out, 1 point in every other week. So they're looking to make sure they could stay on a playoff course. So there is nobody the Flyers could offer them to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And so, it'd be nice to, theorize and say, what could the Flyers offer? And I don't even think the first round draft picks from this year are good enough to
No,
throw
I
in
mean, you
even
could
as a
say, hey, we'll
bonus.
give you 2 firsts and we'll give you Luchenko and we'll give you, I don't know, Frost. And they'll be like, great, thanks.
Nah. Yeah.
It's not what we're envisioning.
Which, like, on its face sounds outrageous, but is also true,
Right.
right?
Right.
Just because I think other teams can offer players that are ready here and now that
Right.
Vancouver can use in order to give up a guy like Pedersen.
Yeah,
But
if they're trading Pedersen, they're looking for 2 now players
Mhm.
right off the roster.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. So that's why they'd have to get Frost and Michkov and maybe
Right.
put them on a line together.
Right. Yeah,
Literally.
something like that. Then they would say, okay, but the Flyers could
Um,
never swing that cap wise either. That's a whole other
Yep,
thing.
absolutely. So the other name I've seen out there recently is Brandt Clark, who we have talked about in the
Mhm.
in the past. You really like him.
I do.
I question whether LA would be serious about trading him at this point.
I mean, Rob Blake is telling somebody or throwing his name out there just because Drew Doughty's back. I mean, I get it. Drew Doughty's tremendous. Still doesn't mean he can't coexist with Brandt Clark in a lineup. Of course he can. But if this is what the Kings are going to do, this is what the Kings are going to do. What would be an upgrade for the Kings? Well, I don't think, like, if you could give them Risto, that's not enough. Like, in the sense that they would want more, but I don't even think it's enough on the blue line. I think if they were looking for a defenseman on the blue line, like, Florida could say, hey, we'll give you Ekblad. And then now you're in the conversation. Now it's like, okay, what else? The Flyers don't have that what else on the blue line. And that's what I think they're still looking for. I think they're just looking to change it up because they're thinking, well, maybe because we have Doughty, we don't really need Clark. He's a luxury. But we still need somebody with playoff experience who could help us win. And a guy like Ekblad would be that guy, right? So I don't think the Flyers have the right pieces for this one either. Now, if the Kings were like, no, we'll take some futures. Hey, great. Then it would be Luchenko and at least 1 or 2 firsts. And probably
Yeah.
1 first. Probably Luchenko,
And a first and a second.
and a second. That's
Yeah.
probably what it would take. I still don't think they would take that deal, though.
I know. And that's, again, like at the trade deadline, prices are high.
Yes.
And you just kind of have to accept that. And so if you're going to make a big deal at trade deadline, like you have to give up a lot to get
You do.
a medium amount in return.
They have a lot of draft
if you're on the
capital.
side, if you're on the side of things that you need something, you're always going to have to pay more than you're giving up.
Right. They have a lot of draft capital, but they don't have a lot of capital other than that. And just as an example, so Brandt Clark has 24 points. So he'd be the second highest scoring defenseman on the Flyers already at his, at the tender age of 21. So based on that, the price is very high.
Yeah, and of course they tailor the price to the team they're dealing with too.
Yes.
No, and the Kings would know that for sure.
Well, and look, Dean Lombardi would try and sweet talk them, and probably not going to matter.
Yeah. Anybody else on your list of rumors out there?
Yeah, Dylan Cousins. He's another one. My whole thing with Dylan Cousins is the Sabres, I think, are still expecting to trade him as a center, and he's really come a long way on faceoffs. He's about 50% on faceoffs, and he's winning more than 50 lately. So he's improved on that, but his offense is way down. And I believe he's the kind of player that would be much better off on the wing. And that's what I've always felt he was, a winger, but they had to make him a center. They paid him like a center. And it's like all of a sudden his points drop from 68 to 47 to now 26, which will probably still be around that 45 point mark. But you can't trade a boatload for 45. That's the problem. Now, I would make him a good offer. And if they accepted the offer, if I'm the Flyers, I make him a winger. But knowing that, I can't put Luchenko in the deal because I don't expect to make Cousins a center because I don't need a 45-point center with 50% faceoffs. That's just not enough for the future here. So I still need Jet Luchenko. So now Luchenko's off the board.
Right. But and what's the point of having 2 2s when you need a 1?
Well, I mean, a lot of teams have 2-2s. You could argue that when Zibanejad got to the Rangers, he was a 2 and then turned into a 1, and now he's back to a 3. So that's, you know what I mean? Like, this is what happens
Yeah.
to guys. I think what I'm looking at with this situation is it would have to be like they have Seth Appert there, and they have, so they understand the NTDP. So Farabee would be a name I think that would be of interest to them. But I think it would be Farabee and then a pick. And it doesn't have to be a first because the Sabres are loaded with picks. They're not after picks. They're after players. And so like Farabee and Helge Grans isn't enough. It would have to be Farabee and, it might have to be Cam York as an example. Yeah. Probably wouldn't be York, though. You probably could get him. See, the thing is they don't want Risto back. So that's not a fit. So it's like that's the problem. The Flyers have Sanheim. They have York. You're going to trade them Bonk? They might take Bonk. But I'm saying that's probably what you're looking at. Bonk, Farabee, and a pick.
I just don't think the Flyers are going for that.
No, probably not. But that's what they're going to ask for because the prices are high. Because they're looking for a center return. They don't care how you use them. Doesn't matter to them.
Also true. Also very true. But we'll see if anything develops over the next week and a half or so leading up to the break. In the meantime, the Flyers are facing the Utah Hockey Club on Tuesday, and they just announced that due to failed copyright attempts on a lot of names, they're kind of in.
Yeti's the one they wanted.
Yeti's the main one that they wanted, but the thermos and cooler brand kind of nixed that. So right now they're down to 3 names that they're allowing fans to vote for again, which I think is a bad decision to have another round of voting. I think they should just pick something and said, this is what we are.
I think they should do that. Although I have a name I would give them. And here's the name. I know you used to live in Utah. I never lived there. But I did work for a sales company for like 10 years that was in Ogden, Utah. So I got to know people in Utah. And this was back, though. This is a little while ago. So this is back when alcohol wasn't really readily available. And the word was everybody ate a lot of ice cream. So I call them the Utah Scoops. There you go. And you can have all the different colors. You could have the Neapolitan covers.
That is not a hockey team name.
Oh, you're just a hater. You're just a hater.
No, I just don't think it makes sense for an NHL hockey team.
It makes sense for Utah. It's Utah centric, but okay, fine. You come up with your name.
I don't know. They're more about like flavored soda than ice cream these days.
Okay, so it's switched. Okay.
So the options are keeping Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, which it feels like they're trying to push people toward.
They're trying to push them because I guess we're envisioning like a woolly mammoth kind of look, and and
they could have a similar like logo vibe to it with the snowy like ancient creature thing.
Yeah, like as an example, you see how the with the sea kraken are selling like the octopus arms. They could sell like tusky looking things that are blow ups, right, from like a woolly mammoth, something like that.
Yeah, and then the third option is Utah Wasatch, and that is named after the mountain range that is on the east side of Salt Lake City. Unlike
that is
the west
very
side,
Utah-centric.
Very Utah-centric. Very different from the mountains on the west side of the valley, which is the Ochre Mountains. So there's the Wasatch Mountains and the Ochre Mountains.
But so you'd have to show the mountain range on the logo.
Yeah, so which they do anyway on like the Jazz uniforms and stuff.
Right.
Too.
So it wouldn't be original enough.
I don't think so. And it's so hyper specific and people don't know what it is. I just like, it feels like Mammoth is where we're going with all of this.
It does feel like Mammoth is where they're going. They could have a cool mascot. It would be almost like if they already ordered the Yeti mascot, all you got to do is add the curled tusks. You still got the hairy body. So that part still works out. So, I mean, would Gritty hate this mascot? For sure. I mean, this would be a big rival of Gritty's right off the bat.
Yeah, well, good luck with that, buddy. Anyway, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back on Monday to talk Flyers versus Avs and have our nemesis of the week. And as a reminder, we always want to hear from you. You can send in mailbag questions or your Flyers thoughts to any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology at the same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, get the edge over league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.